Hey everybody, I'm Jack with Future Pastimes. I'm a designer in Dune-themed games and expansions, and we're reading Dune. And we are back with the Fremen and with Paul and Jessica, and they've arrived at Siege Tabor. And they get in, and everybody is taking off their nose plugs and their face guards for their still suits, and Paul does as well. And it's very crowded as they're getting in there. And Paul is immediately assailed by the smells of the siege, especially all of the unwashed bodies, but a lot of other stuff going on. And he's like, where's my mother? And he hears her voice, and she's saying like, I can smell all sorts of great activity going on here, Stilgar. You're doing a lot with your spice. You're making plastics, and you're making all these other things. And do I smell chemical explosives? And somebody else is like, you can tell all that from the smell. And Paul realizes that his mother is actually saying all this for his benefit, because she wants him to just accept it, to say like, look, this is the thing. Don't make a scene. Get used to it. So he does, and then he hears some whispering. He's looking for Chani, and he can't see her. And somebody's like, poor Chani. And he learns that the Fremen have found out that Liet is dead, and Liet was Chani's father. And the Fremen are pretty pissed about it, and Paul is as well. They hear that they've made it, tried to make it look like an accident, like his thopter crashed and he died in the desert, but they know better. They know that Liet, even if he were trapped in the desert, would be fine. So they know that it's hearken and treachery. And one of the Fremen is like, does Usul, Paul, do you hunger for revenge? But before he can respond, there's some commotion, and he sees that Stilgar has brought this young woman forward, and she points at Paul, and she says, this bested my Jamis. And Stilgar explains that this is Jamis's wife, and that Paul is now responsible for her and for Jamis's two sons. And he asks Paul if he wants Hara as his wife, or as his woman, not really a wife necessarily, as his woman or as his servant. And Paul is like, I gotta be careful here. And Hara is like, well, I'm still young, check me out. And Paul he's like, if I take her on as a servant, can I change my mind at some point? And Stilgar's like, you have a year and you can change your mind and do as you will. And Hara's like, I'm still young, and Stilgar's like, all right, you quiet down. He's made his decision, and that's probably a good decision. So he instructs Hara to take Paul to their yali, their quarters there in the siege, and to, take care of his needs, whatever they may be. You're his servant now. And so she takes him in through the siege, and they're passing a lot of the activity. It's full. There's a lot of people there, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of areas in the siege where there's activity, and Paul is like, what are they doing here? What are they doing there? And she's explaining, well, they're building dew collectors, and she has to explain to them what that is, and all of the other activities. And there's real industry going on. She explains how she works on the basically the factory that makes still suits. And she's like, if your still suit needs any work, I'm pretty good. That's where I work sometimes. So Paul is really getting introduced to what goes on. They're not just a ragged bunch of people living in a cave. They've got industry going on. And earlier we heard about how the Fremen still suits are the best still suits. So they definitely have our artistry and workmanship. And so Paul is finally getting a chance to see that. And he wondered where Chani has gone off to, but she's dealing with the loss of her father, which Paul realizes they have that in common now. And Paul asks Hara, if she hates him because he killed Jamis, and she's like, why would I hate you? And Paul learns that one of the sons of Jamis was actually not his son. It was Jeff, who was with Hara before Jamis bested him. But Jamis was good with the children. He saw his two sons as equals, even though one of them was actually Jeff's son. And so Paul is starting to get a sense of what this is. And he asks Hara if she'll grieve Jamis, and she explains, when it's time to mourn, I will mourn. But she's impressed that he gave water to the dead. And she said, you were a friend of Jamis, so why should I hate you? Stilgar said it was a fair fight. So Paul is getting situated there in the Yali, and understanding of what Fremen culture is starting to be like, and how he's going to have to adapt to be there. And so yeah, he has Hara go and get him some food, and he's just kind of taking everything in, wondering where his mother has gone off to, and just how he's going to integrate into Fremen culture. And he's kind of trying to not get too wrapped up in his prescience. He's getting a little bit of that sense, but he's trying to focus on the here and now, and just absorb everything. So that's really what's going on here. It's a little, not necessarily cultural shock for Paul, but he's realizing that this is a different culture, and that he's in it now, and he doesn't want to offend. He wants to tread carefully and learn, and take advantage of it as much as possible. And in the back of his mind, he's also trying to think of how can he use the culture in such a way as to avoid the jihad. That's always kind of ever present on his mind. It's what he's most afraid of, is that if he does get really wrapped up in what's going on in Fremen culture, that it will lead to the horrors of so many lives lost in his name, which he's not too thrilled about. So that's where we are with this chapter. It's got some interesting new insights into the Fremen culture, which I find interesting. And I really appreciated that they had all of the industry. That was, I thought, a really important part of this chapter. But we're only getting really just flashes of it. And we're seeing that there is another side to the Fremen that I think Paul also finds interesting. But it just means that it's that much harder for him to get a grasp on the whole Fremen environment that he's in, and whether or not he can catch up in order to avoid catastrophe. So there you have it. If you have any questions, let me know. Leave your comments if you're reading along, and what you think of this chapter. And thanks for watching and listening in, and we'll see you again soon.